You know, usually when we look at the world around us, we draw this pretty hard, comforting line between what's alive and what's just a machine.
Right, he's saying simple.
Exactly. I mean, on one side of that boundary, you've got biology, flesh, blood, and, erratic human emotion.
And on the other side, it's just gears, circuits, predictable math.
Yeah. You certainly don't expect your toaster to experience anxiety.
No, definitely not.
And you wouldn't expect a mathematical formula to perfectly map out a human panic attack. But when you look at modern artificial intelligence, suddenly that comfortable boundary is just completely gone.
It really is. It's totally blurred.
Right. We have machines today that learn, that adapt, that seemingly mimic the very neurological processes that make us alive. And if you listening have ever wondered who it was that first erased that line, who originally connected the dots between living things and machines, well, that is exactly what we are exploring today. I'm your host, ready to jump in.
And I'm your resident expert, here to help unpack the history and the science. It really is an incredible origin story.
It is. So today's deep dive is built on excerpts from the Wikipedia page on Norbert Wiener. And our mission today is to untack the life of this fascinating child prodigy turned mathematician.
We really need to understand how his quest to make sense of a chaotic world led to the birth of what we call cybernetics.
Yes, all while navigating his own deeply complicated human flaws. So, basic facts. Born in 1894, died in 1964. He was an American mathematician, a philosopher, and effectively one of the very first computer scientists before that was even like a real job title.
Yeah, he influenced massive computing pioneers, people like John von Neumann and Claude Shannon.
But what makes Wiener so compelling to me is that he is the ultimate absent-minded professor trope just come to life.
Oh, absolutely.
Like he's literally forgetting where his own house is, but simultaneously laying the philosophical groundwork for the entire modern technological age.
But to truly understand how he rewired our understanding of information, we have to look at how his own brain was wired from birth. Because the man who would eventually explain the behavior of complex systems was forged in this incredibly intense, unstable system of his childhood home.
Yeah, let's look at the architect of that home, his father, Leo Wiener. Because, I mean, you simply do not get a Norbert without a Leo.
You really don't.
Leo was a Jewish immigrant born in what is now Poland, and the guy was an absolute force of nature, a linguist who spoke multiple languages, a strict follower of Leo Tolstoy's philosophies. And get this, before Norbert was even born, Leo actually traveled to the Americas with the grand intention of starting a vegetarian, Tolstoyan commune in Central America.
Which is just a wild detail.
Central American commune.
Yeah, but that grand plan collapsed when his companion basically abandoned him on a ship.
Oh, wow.
But that extreme idealistic dogmatism didn't just fade away. It found a new target. When Norbert was born in Missouri, Leo essentially turned all of that intense, unyielding focus directly onto his son.
Which is terrifying.
It really is. Leo became his private tutor and subjected Norbert to this extreme, relentless homeschooling regimen of his own invention.
Yeah, the sources describe this dynamic in a way that just, it makes your stomach knot up. Norbert noted later in life that his father was generally calm and patient right up until the exact moment Norbert made a mistake.
Or just gave a slightly wrong answer.
Right. And in that fraction of a second, his father would completely lose his temper.
And the psychological toll of that kind of environment is staggering.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Norbert wasn't just being taught advanced math and languages. He was being systematically conditioned to associate intellectual imperfection with explosive emotional consequences.
Like every equation held the threat of a psychological landmine.
Exactly. Plus, Leo rigidly enforced his strict vegetarianism on the household, complete with handing out these hair-raising tracts about animal cruelty.
Which Norbert just deeply resented later in life, right?
Yeah, he viewed his father's dogmatism as a profound form of emotional abuse.
But, I mean, on paper, the results of this bizarre upbringing look like a miracle.
They do.
Norbert graduates from high school at 11 years old. He gets a Bachelor of Arts in Mathematics from Tufts College at 14. He bounces between studying zoology at Harvard and philosophy at Cornell, and then goes back to Harvard to get his PhD in mathematical logic at age 19. 19. It's insane.
And that wasn't some vanity PhD granted to a novelty child either.
Right. It was legit.
Oh, very legit. His dissertation was a major piece of foundational work. He was the first to state publicly that ordered pairs could be defined in terms of elementary set theory.
Okay, hold on. For those of us listening who don't dream in calculus, what does that actually mean in plain English?
Well, Think of it as finding the absolute bedrock of mathematics.
Okay.
An ordered pair is just a way of linking two things together where the order matters like coordinates on a map.
Got it. Like X and Y.
Exactly. And set theory is the most basic way of grouping objects together. Wiener took these incredibly complex logical ideas and proved they could be built using the most basic, fundamental building blocks of math.
So he was simplifying the very foundation of logic itself.
Yes.
But hearing that resume, the 19-year-old PhD, it raises an important question for you listening to this. Because the natural reaction is to think, wow, what a beautiful blossoming of a natural genius.
Sure, that's the standard narrative.
But based on that terrifying home life, I have to ask, was this actually a prodigy, or is this kind of like trying to build a supercomputer by just constantly overclocking the processor until it almost burns out?
That analogy hits the nail on the head.
Because it sounds so damaging.
It is. Overclocking a processor might get you incredible short-term performance speeds, but it creates massive, dangerous instability in the entire system. And we see that instability bubbling up incredibly early with Norbert.
Yeah, the paper he wrote, right.
Yeah. At just 10 years old, while trapped under this immense pressure, Norbert wrote a philosophical paper called The Theory of Ignorance.
A 10-year-old writing about the theory of ignorance.
In it, this kid argues that it is incredibly presumptuous for human beings to declare that our knowledge has no limits.
Wow.
He wrote that all human knowledge is, at best, just an approximation, and it's fundamentally impossible to be absolutely certain of anything.
That is heartbreaking. Think about the psychology there.
Oh, it's so transparent.
You have a kid whose entire daily survival demands absolute perfect answers under the constant threat of his father's rage, and he's secretly writing an essay arguing that perfect answers don't actually exist.
It's a total coping mechanism.
Right, but it also becomes the seed of his entire scientific worldview later on.
Exactly. He's already realizing that the universe isn't a clean, perfect equation on a chalkboard. It's messy. It's approximate. Which honestly seamlessly explains his chaotic early adulthood.
Because he was just a mess.
Yeah, all that early overclocking produced a 19-year-old with a groundbreaking PhD who had absolutely no practical idea of how to physically exist in the world or, interact with other human beings.
He is completely adrift, so he travels to Europe, studies with absolute titans of logic, Bertrand Russell, David Hilbert.
Giants in the field.
Then he comes back, teaches philosophy at Harvard. He works as an engineer for General Electric. He even tries to be a journalist.
Which did not go well.
No. He actually gets a job at the Boston Herald, but gets fired almost immediately.
Because he flat out refused to write a favorable puff piece about a politician the newspaper owners happened to like.
I mean, that refusal shows a remarkably rigid ethical spine, even if it was terrible for his immediate career prospects.
Yeah, you see this brilliant mind desperately searching for a practical application for his intellect and a sense of belonging in a society he just doesn't understand.
And then World War I breaks out, and that desperation reaches a boiling point. He desperately wants to be part of something real.
Which is one of the most surprising facts in the source material, honestly.
Yeah, because later in life, Wiener becomes a very staunch, vocal pacifist.
Right. But when WWI starts, he wants to serve so badly. He tries to become an officer but fails. He tries to enlist as a regular soldier, but gets rejected because his eyesight is terrible.
So they put him at a desk.
The military eventually invites him to work as a civilian mathematician on ballistics at the Aberdeen Proving Ground, but he's utterly unsatisfied sitting behind a desk while others fight.
He actually writes a letter to his parents saying he would feel like a, quote, cheap kind of a swine if he was willing to be an officer but wasn't willing to be a common soldier.
So he tries again as a common soldier and finally gets accepted.
And by sheer absurd coincidence, the Army assigns him right back to the exact same desk.
The exact same desk.
At the Aberdeen Proving Ground to do the exact same math, just wearing a uniform this time.
And then the war ends just days later.
The irony is just staggering. Here is the guy who will eventually map out the perfectly predictable, mathematically sound paths of automated systems, and at this point in his life, he is bouncing around like a pinball.
Totally unpredictable.
Even after the war, he struggles to find a home. He gets rejected for a permanent spot at Harvard.
Which he largely attributed to anti-Semitism from a mathematician there named G.D. Birkhoff.
And he gets rejected by the University of Melbourne.
He finally lands a permanent safe harbor at MIT. And, it is worth noting how he viewed his own identity during this barrage of rejection.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Wiener's family traced its roots back to Moses, Maimonides, and other great rabbis, but neither he nor his father were religious. Instead, the sources note that Wiener viewed Judaism primarily as a tight-knit community and a social entity that, historically, placed a massive emphasis on scholarship and learning.
So he explicitly distanced himself from Zionism and Jewish nationalism.
Right. He argued that the Jewish people and their traditions of learning were much older and deeper than modern nationalist movements.
So he found his true belonging in the universal community of scholarship.
MIT finally provided that physical community for him. But abstract math alone wasn't enough to satisfy him.
No, it took the existential threat of a second global conflict to force him to take those equations off the chalkboard and apply them to flesh and blood survival.
This is the real breakthrough.
In 1941, World War II is raging, and the military is facing a terrifying new problem: high-speed bombers.
Yeah.
So Wiener is assigned to work on the automatic aiming and firing of anti-aircraft guns. Because, I mean, if a plane is flying that fast, you can't just point a gun at it and pull the trigger.
By the time your bullet gets to where the plane was, the plane is long gone.
Exactly. To shoot down a bomber, you have to shoot where it will be. You literally have to predict the future.
But the future of a bomber isn't a straight, predictable line. There is a terrified human pilot sitting in that cockpit.
And they're going to panic.
Right. When anti-aircraft flak starts exploding around the plane, that pilot is going to take evasive action. They're going to dodge unpredictably. So Wiener is faced with this massive theoretical hurdle.
How do you mathematically predict the evasive maneuvers of a panicked human being flying a complex machine?
Exactly.
I'm trying to visualize this. Is it kind of like playing a fast-paced multiplayer video game online where someone has a terrible internet connection?
Oh, that's a great way to think about it.
Like their character is lagging, jumping around the screen unpredictably. Does your console's software have to constantly guess where that player is actually going to be in the next fraction of a second so the game doesn't crash?
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Because what the video game console is doing is looking at the player's past trajectory, considering the typical physics of the game, and essentially filtering out the noise of the bad connection to predict their path.
Wow.
Wiener did the exact same thing with radar and anti-aircraft guns.
Yeah.
He realized he could no longer treat the mechanical airplane and the biological human as two separate things.
He had to erase that boundary we talked about at the beginning.
Precisely. He modeled both the human pilot's behavior and the mechanical airplane's behavior as a single unified system. And to the mathematics, the pilot's erratic dodging was just a form of statistical noise.
That is incredible. He literally treated human panic as mathematical noise.
And the resulting solution was the Wiener filter.
The Wiener filter.
Published in 1942 as a highly classified document. It was actually nicknamed the Yellow Peril because of its yellow cover and how impossibly difficult the math was for most people to comprehend.
I bet.
It was a statistical theory designed to predict the future state of a system based on incomplete information about its past, specifically by mathematically filtering out that noise.
Think about the poetic nature of that. He is taking his 10-year-old self's realization that all knowledge is merely an approximation, and he is weaponizing it.
Yeah, he really is.
He's saying, we can never know exactly what this pilot will do, but we can mathematically approximate it well enough to shoot him out of the sky.
And in solving that highly specific, violent military problem, Wiener accidentally uncovered a universal truth about how all systems operate.
The big realization.
By realizing that human behavior and machine behavior could be modeled using the exact same mathematical logic, he birthed a brand new field of science. He called it cybernetics.
He published his seminal book of the same name in 1948, defining cybernetics as the science of communication and control in the animal and the machine.
Again, erasing the boundary.
The animal and the machine. But let me challenge this because I know you listening might be wondering. Is cybernetics actually a new invention?
What do you mean?
Well, like a thermostat turns on the heat when a room gets cold. Animals sweat when they get hot to cool down. Didn't nature already invent this and Wiener just slapped a fancy new Greek label on it?
Well, Wiener himself would be the first to agree with you. Yeah, he openly acknowledged that the philosophical roots of these ideas were in the work of earlier thinkers like Leibniz, Babbage, and Maxwell.
Yeah.
What made Wiener's work utterly revolutionary wasn't inventing the concept, it was formalizing it mathematically so it could be built into machines.
Ah, I see.
He proved that the nervous system of a biological human and the electrical circuits of a mechanical computer operate on the exact same underlying principle, the feedback loop.
The feedback loop. You act, you observe the result of your action, that new information feeds back into your system, and you adjust your next action accordingly.
And Wiener articulated the importance of this with a quote that basically kicks off the modern information age. He wrote, "Information is information, not matter or energy."
Let's pause on that because the implications are massive.
Yeah.
For all of human history, physics was concerned with stuff you could touch, matter,
Yeah.
and the force that moves it, energy. Wiener steps up and declares there is a third fundamental property of the universe, information. A biological nervous system and a copper wire aren't made of the same matter, but they are capable of processing the exact same information.
That conceptual leap is the very foundation that makes modern artificial intelligence possible.
It's mind-blowing.
If intelligence is simply the processing of information through feedback loops, then a machine can be built to be intelligent. He is widely credited as one of the first scientists to theorize that intelligent behavior could be authentically simulated by machines.
So he publishes this, and he becomes an absolute legend at MIT.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where the stories of his absent-mindedness really take off. My personal favorite is the house-moving story.
Oh, that one is classic.
The legend goes that Wiener's family was moving to a new house just a few blocks away. At the end of the day, Wiener walks home from MIT, completely lost in his own complex thoughts, and walks right up to his old empty house.
He just totally forgot.
He's standing there confused, sees a little girl on the sidewalk, and says, "Excuse me, do you know where the Wieners moved?" And the little girl looks up at him and says, "It's okay, Daddy, Mommy sent me to get you."
His daughter later mentioned that while the story might be slightly exaggerated by history, it was pretty close to what actually happened.
That's hilarious. But, we have to look closer because this extreme absent-mindedness and erratic focus had a much darker, more destructive side.
It really did. Wiener had built a pioneering cognitive science team at MIT, bringing together brilliant minds like neuropsychiatrist Warren McCulloch and a young, astonishingly brilliant mathematician named Walter Pitts.
They were making incredible strides in modeling how brain neurons work, like logic gates, right?
Yeah, the absolute dream team for the birth of computer science.
But then, entirely out of nowhere, Wiener completely severed all contact with them.
He cut them off cold.
And the human fallout was tragic. Walter Pitts was so emotionally traumatized by the sudden, unexplained rejection from his mentor that it triggered a lifelong decline into depression and alcoholism, effectively ruining his career and his life.
It's incredibly sad.
Wait, he just cuts them off. You don't walk away from a dream team like that, especially when you are on the verge of mapping human cognition without a massive catalyst. What triggered it?
Well, the historical sources offer two main theories.
Yeah.
The first involves his wife, Margaret. Margaret had a very traditional conservative mindset, and she absolutely detested Warren McCulloch's unconventional bohemian lifestyle.
Oh, I see.
The theory suggests she engineered the breach behind the scenes, feeding Wiener lies to separate him from McCulloch.
And the second theory?
The second theory points to Wiener's own professional paranoia.
How so?
Someone apparently suggested to Wiener that at a previous conference, McCulloch had provided him with some physiological facts about the brain that were actually just unproven theories. Wiener had built complex math around those so-called facts, presented it, and got heavily criticized by actual physiologists.
So he felt set up.
Yeah, Wiener became convinced that McCulloch had intentionally set him up to be humiliated.
Oh, wow. Think about how that connects back to his childhood.
Exactly.
If McCulloch gave him false facts that led to public humiliation, it would trigger Wiener's deepest, most ingrained childhood trauma, making a mistake and facing explosive wrath.
Yep.
His father's rage conditioned him to view being wrong as an existential threat. Of course, he would react with paranoid self-preservation.
That psychological knot makes perfect sense. And you add to that another detail from his autobiography. Wiener admitted to a lifelong unmanaged use of benzodrine amphetamines.
Oh, wow. Amphetamines.
He used the drugs to fuel his incredible, nonstop productivity. But he likely wasn't fully aware of the severe psychological dangers, which include heightened paranoia and volatile mood swings.
A brilliant mind, overclocked by childhood trauma, sustained by amphetamines, building the mathematical foundations of the future. It's a volatile mix.
Very volatile.
But despite these profound personal flaws, Wiener possessed an incredibly clear, almost prophetic moral compass regarding his actual scientific work. Which brings us to the final chapter of his life, The Conscience of a Cybernetician.
You really have to consider the trajectory here. Wiener had spent 2 world wars applying his genius directly to military problems. He literally built the math to efficiently shoot down airplanes.
Right.
But when he saw how deeply humans and machines could be integrated through cybernetics, and he saw the aggressive trajectory of the post-war military-industrial complex, he was horrified by his own creation.
The man who mathematically modeled the chaos of war suddenly slams on the brakes.
Yes.
In 1947, he publishes a landmark article in the Atlantic Monthly titled "A Scientist Rebels."
In that piece, he urgently pleaded with his fellow scientists to deeply consider the ethical implications of the technologies they were building. He warned that the automation they were creating could be used to exploit humanity rather than elevate it.
I want you listening to think about modern tech developers today. Think about the AI engineers building the tools that are currently reshaping our global economy.
It's so relevant.
It is vanishingly rare to see a scientist at the absolute peak of their field, the recognized father of a new science, just walk away from unlimited government and military funding.
But that is exactly what Wiener did.
He unequivocally refused all government and military grants after WWWI because he actually sat down and thought about the moral consequences of his equations.
He fundamentally believed that automation in cybernetics shouldn't be used to build better weapons or displace workers, but to improve living standards and end economic underdevelopment.
And he actually acted on that.
He put those beliefs into practice. He traveled to India in the 1950s to advise their government directly on how to use automated technology to lift massive populations out of poverty.
And crucially, he didn't care about arbitrary national borders. He freely shared his research with everyone, including Soviet scientists.
Which, if you know anything about the middle of the Cold War and the Red Scare,
Right, yeah.
that made the U.S. government incredibly suspicious of him. They couldn't understand a scientist who viewed knowledge as a shared human resource rather than a classified national weapon.
But that open sharing was just cybernetics in action, wasn't it?
Exactly. For Wiener, a system only functions well if information flows freely. If you block the feedback loop with government secrecy and paranoia, the entire system inevitably fails. He was simply trying to optimize human society the same way he optimized those anti-aircraft predictors.
So let's pull all of this together and look at the incredible journey we've just taken. We started with a kid, Norbert Wiener, locked in a biological pressure cooker by an overbearing father, realizing at age 10 that perfect knowledge is impossible.
We followed him as a young, erratic genius adrift in the world, struggling to find his place until the violent chaos of World War II forced him to find the predictable mathematical patterns hidden inside human panic.
Which ultimately led him to formalize cybernetics, the grand, universe-shifting realization that information is its own fundamental property, and that feedback loops govern both the living flesh and the mechanical circuit.
He laid the philosophical and mathematical groundwork for artificial intelligence, all while battling his own internal noise, his deep-seated trauma, and the crushing ethical weight of the very future he was hoping to create.
He saw the incredible utopian potential of the human-machine connection, but he also clearly foresaw the terrifying consequences if we didn't carefully manage the feedback loops of our own society.
It's a heavy legacy.
Which brings us right back to that hard boundary we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive, the line between biology and machinery.
Right.
Norbert Wiener proved mathematically that the line doesn't really exist, that we are all, at our core, just systems processing information. But as you go about your day-to-day, looking at your phone, interacting with algorithms that predict what you'll buy or what you'll watch next, I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over.
Yeah.
Wiener taught us that all intelligent behavior relies on feedback loops, taking in information about your past mistakes to adjust your future course. But looking at how fast we are rushing headfirst into the age of artificial intelligence today, you have to wonder, as a society, are we actually listening to the feedback loop Wiener tried to leave us in 1947? Or have we become the erratic, lagging system that even Norbert Wiener couldn't predict?